everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me once again is Maureen Callahan, columnist and author of Ask Not, The Kennedys and the Women They Destroyed. Maureen, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me again, Brittany.
I am so excited to speak with you because you and I spoke about your book in the summer, and your book really goes through the family tree of the Kennedys, this political dynasty in our country, and it really just dismantles it almost limb by limb, going through everything from the extreme recklessness to the allegations of sexual abuse and everything in between of these generations. And you do talk about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in this book. He's been in the news now for the last couple of days because he's Donald Trump's nominee to serve as Secretary of Health and Human Services, and he's faced a Senate confirmation hearing. He's been testifying. What are your thoughts?
So, for anyone who maybe has read Ask Not, or even if you haven't, I don't think it would surprise you to know that I'm not the greatest fan of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I talk about him in the book in terms of the way he treated his second wife, Mary Richardson Kennedy, who he really tormented, and she wound up killing herself in 2012. He made a big stink about getting her body, fighting her siblings for it. When he got her body, he made a big show of having her buried in the Kennedy family plot. 1 week later, he had her casket secretly exhumed in the dead of night. He reburied her about 700 yards away, alone on the side of a hill. He was very active in the Martha Moxley case. Kennedy cousin Michael Skakel was eventually convicted for the brutal sexual assault and murder of this 15-year-old girl in Connecticut in the 70s. And Bobby had tried to pin the crime on like a black kid and a mixed race kid, and he named them, and there was no basis in fact for that. Skakel's conviction was ultimately vacated. Bobby had a lot to do with that. He wrote a book about it. So I am not a fan. I understand the MAGA/Maha movement and the incredible desire for a disruptor. And this is where the Kennedy name cuts both ways, right? Because of the Kennedy name, he already has this profile and a level of, depending on where you fall, credence, or just he's a complete buffoon. But that is the legacy. So when his cousin Caroline came forward the day before to offer her 2 cents, that was a bombshell.
And let's get into that because that was over 6 minutes of, her 2 cents, to put it lightly. It was no holds bar, just going on, hey, we're a close family. All our generation of, I believe it was 28 cousins, are super close, but I have to speak out about Bobby. He's a predator, goes on and on about him. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, my first thought is 6 minutes is way too long. It's like the Justin Baldoni voicemail to Blake Lively. Tighten that shit up, okay? But secondly, using the word predator coming out of Caroline Kennedy's mouth is rich indeed. Her father, again, as detailed granularly in Ask Not, sexual predator. Her uncle Ted Kennedy, who gave Caroline away at her wedding, left a young woman to die in less than 6 feet of water at Chappaquiddick. He was a serial sexual abuser of women. So, and that's just the tip of the iceberg with this family. So my question to Caroline is this. If she truly believed that Bobby was a threat to the nation and should never be in a position of power, why are you waiting until the 11th hour to sound the alarm? Why aren't you campaigning well before to make sure this guy never has a shot at a position of power?
She said that she was quiet, really, essentially, because, hey, I was serving in the administration. I didn't want to speak till now.
I'm sorry, serving in what capacity? As an ambassador? That's a do-nothing gift of a job for like shoving some money at a campaign. Spare me. She's hardly at his level, but please go on.
No, and I actually she was quoted complimenting her Uncle Teddy in her video. She said that he had would be disgusted because he devoted his long Senate career to the cause of improving healthcare. You have quite a few chapters on Uncle Teddy in question here in your book, and we really dove into them in July. But I mean, why now is the good point, and B, is this typical of a Kennedy to go against another Kennedy?
It's really not, to that last question, which is a great question, Brittany. I mean, they have been raised, you do not turn on your own. That family protects their secrets. And, there was a cousin named David who spoke to journalists in the early 80s, I want to say, or late 70s, before he tragically died of a heroin overdose. He became a pariah for speaking about the myriad problems that have riddled his family for generations. For her to cite Uncle Teddy as a sort of Mount Rushmore type figure in the health and well-being of the American body politic, I mean, either she's uneducated or willfully ignorant or both. My theory about this 11th hour Hail Mary to destroy her cousin's chances is that Caroline was supposed to be the political star of the family. Caroline was the heir apparent, the daughter of JFK and Jackie. She was the one who was always branded as the family intellectual. She was going to be the political heavyweight. Guess what? When she tried to usurp everybody else to get Hillary Clinton's Senate seat in New York about 12, 15 years ago, she went on a round of interviews, and even the adoring New York Times had to be like, this woman is a disaster. She couldn't string together a cogent sentence. She had no idea what was going on in current events, the news. She had a middling to little grasp of American history. She was revealed as an entitled, spoiled brat, non-intellectual princess. And I have to wonder if this is not motivated by some sort of jealousy that her cousin has superseded her on the American stage and may leave a more lasting legacy than she, Camelot's princess, ever will.
Let's go on to RFK Jr. because he faced what is obviously the hot seat yesterday. He was on there answering questions, contentious questions, everything from his stance on vaccines to abortion. And it was really like no holds bar there. His supporters do think, as you mentioned, that he can be this change maker to the Make America Healthy Again movement. He can be this disruptor in the industry that we so desperately need to take back healthcare in our country. What do you make of these two really separate ideas?
I find it a kind of masochistic experience to watch these Senate confirmation hearings, because to see these senators in high dudgeon over moral and ethical failings that they are castigating these nominees for, when we all know like 99.9% of them are as corrupt as it comes. Elizabeth Warren has taken in over $1 million from the pharmaceutical industry. She can shut up. What Bobby's overarching message is, and again, I'm not really a fan of his, but I do think the MAHA movement, which is a clear reaction to COVID, is about big pharma, big ag, and big medicine, much more interested in a sick population than a healthy one. And that America, the greatest nation on the planet and the most sophisticated in the industrialized world, has a population that is overwhelmingly obese and riddled with chronic diseases that are making big pharma rich, is a monolith that needs to be smashed to pieces. And I think that's a threat. And I think that's why you're seeing this pushback.
Do you think, though, based on your reporting, and you're a self-described not a fan of RFK Jr., do you think he's the right person for this moment?
That's not really up to me. What I think is that Donald Trump was elected with a clear mandate. He won the popular vote. He gets to install the people he wants to install, barring some incredibly disqualifying feature, right? The people that Joe Biden installed were terrible. I was thinking about Pete Buttigieg today as transportation secretary. We're dealing with a major catastrophe with this horrific plane crash that happened last night. Could you imagine if Pete Buttigieg was in charge of this? The guy who left like East Palestine to just suffer for months without putting a $900 booted foot on the ground. So this is Donald Trump's stated wishes. This is who he wants in charge. And again, barring some major disqualifying factor, I do think he should be approved and left to show whether he can do the job or not.
Are they done in the should the Democratic Party leave the Kennedys? I mean, what does that look like?
I don't even think it matters. America's left the Kennedys. America's left Camelot. We've all woken up. We know these people are self-interested, self-aggrandizing liars and opportunists, and they're like resting on their laurels on a name that has come to rightfully mean very little. You know, the book that I wrote, I don't know how you come back from knowing what you know about how this family accrued money and power on the backs of girls and women they systematically broke.
I mean, the book is just harrowing. Every page is just filled with detail and allegation and shock and everything in between. Did you think you'd be sitting here now, 8 months or so later, talking about RFK Jr., talking about the Kennedys in the Republican Party or a Kennedy in the Republican Party? Are you surprised by this turn from when you were sitting down writing that book to now?
I'm actually not surprised. And, while I was writing the book and sort of finishing it up, RFK's ascendancy in the national stage, even as a third party candidate, was telling me something. And it was telling me that he, as a sort of breakaway Kennedy, was really striking a nerve. He's now the outsider Kennedy. He's the apostate. He's the one whose name shall not be spoken within the Kennedy clan. And that to me signified both a political and psychological break in the Kennedy clan, but also for the American psyche. And as much as he's somebody I wouldn't really care to ever be married to or involved with, I think that that break is something that is ultimately, in the long term, very healthy for the American body politic.
You must have a really interesting position right now because you said even in July when you and I talked about the book that it was rigorously fact checked. I'm sure some facts that you know about the Kennedys didn't even make it into the book. So you're sitting there, this wealth of knowledge, having researched this family. You're then sitting there watching RFK Jr. testify. Is that RFK Jr. you saw testifying? Does that square with the RFK Jr. you vigorously reported on and wrote about?
I don't know because I don't know him, but what I can say is I think having researched and reported rigorously his marriage to Mary, his involvement in the Skakel case, the Martha Moxley trial, I think Bobby is someone who probably, like many of his relatives, is a great compartmentalizer, right? So the public political RFK is somebody who really wants to leave a legacy in that space and fulfill his martyred father's promise. I think the personal RFK, again, somebody you probably would not want to be married to, Cheryl Hines. I forget if you and I talked about this, but when it was revealed over the past several months that RFK Jr. had allegedly been having affairs with at least 3 to 4 other women over the past year. And I said, Cheryl Hines is finally getting the full Kennedy wife experience. This is what you get. She was the other woman. She made Mary's life a living hell, according to my reporting. She won her prize, and he's doing the same thing to her. So it comes with a high price marrying into that family. I wouldn't want to be married to him. Could he be a great disruptor at HHS? Very possibly.
So you're essentially saying, hey, two things can be true at once. But looking at him as the HS Secretary nominee, what do you think this shows about where Trump's head is at when it comes to that department, when it comes to health in America going forward?
I think Trump, again, is really trying to disrupt the status quo. We have a media that ignored Anthony Fauci's lies about the origins of COVID. We have a media that ignored Anthony Fauci's ultimate admission that they basically made up a lot of these protocols and had no idea. 6 feet, that was a shot in the dark. Masks, they didn't work. Keeping kids out of schools for months at a time and delaying Their educational and social progress, wholly unnecessary. What Trump is tapping into is a deep distrust of institutional norms and people who do not adhere to the very rules and regulations they insist the rest of the American population, the peons, rely upon. And I actually think you saw a great example of that last week when he sat at a presser with the mayor of LA, Karen Bass. And she's going, we're getting everything going. And he's like, that's not what I'm hearing. A week is a long time. Use your executive powers. Let these people back on their property. Let them start cleaning up. That right there is the pushback between these know-nothing politicians who were elected for reasons that have nothing to do with their ability and people who want a government that works for them, not against them.
Maureen, per usual, I appreciate our conversations. Thank you so much for coming on, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Thanks so much for having me, Brittany, and likewise.